Hello. Let's talk about key concept of social sciences, and this is our first sociology session. Let's start with the beginning. What exactly is sociology? Sociology is the systematic, skeptical, and critical study of human society. It's not just observing people, it's about finding patterns in our behaviors, interactions, and decisions. This is where we use something called the sociological imagination, a tool to see the general in the particular. Imagine stepping back and looking at your life from a bird's eye view. The choices you think are completely your own, what to study, where to live, how to dress, are often shaped by broader social patterns. This is sociology's unique lens uncovering those hidden patterns. Here's a question for you. How much of your life is influenced by the general categories you fall into, like your age, gender, or social class? We might feel independent, but our surroundings subtly guide our behavior. Let's explore this idea with some practical examples. Seeing the strange in the familiar. Sociology challenges us to look at the mundane in a brand new way. This is called seeing the strange in the familiar. It might sound counterintuitive, but think about this. Why is it that so many of us follow similar life paths? Consider university students. Millions of people from around the world are studying at the same age, following similar routines, and chasing similar milestones. Is it just coincidence, or is it the result of societal forces at play? The sociologist Peter Berger once said that sociology helps us to see personal choice in a social context. For example, think about dating. Most of us think love is purely personal, yet studies show that factors like cultural background, education level, and even proximity strongly influence who we end up dating. So ask yourself, how much of your behavior is personal choice and how much is societal influence? This brings us to a big sociological debate: structure versus agency. Are we active agents in control of our lives? Or are we shaped, maybe even constrained by social structures like family, media, or education? Take social media as an example. Do you post what you genuinely want, or do you feel pressured by trends or your audience? While it feels like an individual decision, it's shaped by the broader digital culture around us. Sociology pushes us to challenge what we think we know about ourselves and others. To understand sociology today, we need to take a quick detour to the 18th and 19th century. This was the period of the Enlightenment, a time when human reason was celebrated. People believed that we could improve the human condition through science, rationality, and progress. It was during this time that sociology emerged, coined by the French thinker Auguste Comte in 1838. Comte introduced the idea of positivism, a way of understanding society based on specific observations. Before sociology, people explained the world through religion or tradition. But Comte argued for a more scientific lens, observing, measuring, and analyzing society, just like you would a physics or biology. Fun fact, sociology was born amidst massive social upheavals like the Industrial Revolution, when cities exploded in size. At this point, you might be wondering, should I care about sociology? Let me give you 3 reasons: empowerment, understanding diversity, and active participation. Sociology doesn't have all the answers because society is constantly changing. For example, 10 years ago, no one could have predicted the impact of TikTok on culture on the rise of digital nomads. This fluidity is why we need the sociological imagination, now more than ever. It's a toolkit for navigating our increasingly complex, interconnected world. Society, at its core, society refers to a group of people who interact in a defined space and share culture. It might seem simple, but societies are profoundly complex and constantly evolving. Through history, brilliant minds like Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Émile Durkheim have each offered unique lenses to help us understand these changes. Today we're unpacking it all. Okay, so one thing I would like to talk about is positivism. Positivism, by Auguste Comte, is a term that describes a philosophical school that holds that all genuine knowledge is either true by definition or positive. Let's go back about Karl Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. Let's start with three intellectual giants who greatly influenced sociology. Karl Marx understood human history as an ongoing economic conflict, where material goods, how they are produced, and who control them, shape society. These conflicts generate both inequality and change. Think capitalism versus socialism. On the other hand, Max Weber emphasized the power of human ideas, like religion, and their ability to drive societal change. He believed rationality underpins modern societies and transforms them. Then we have Emile Durkheim, who explored patterns of social solidarity. He compared traditional and modern societies, showing how the bonds that unite us differ drastically between the two. Sociocultural evolution refers to how societies transform as they gain new information and technology. Valinsky identified 5 major stages of societal evolution. Let's break them down. Hunting and gathering societies, horticultural and pastoral societies. In horticultural societies, hand tools helped cultivate crops, settlements became semi-permanent. In pastoral societies, animal domestication shaped nomadic communities in regions like South America, Asia, and Africa. Agrarian societies entered agriculture with the invention of plows and irrigators. Farming became large-scale and sustainable. Slavery becomes common. Patriarchy became entrenched, with men dominating both public and private spheres. Religion often reinforced these hierarchies. Industrial societies. The Industrial Revolution around the 1750s changed everything. Factories replaced farms and the primary economic driver. Post-industrial societies, 1970s, ushered in the Information Revolution. Computers and digital technology revolutionized how we work, live, and connect. Today we're a globalized world tied together by the internet and shared technology. But this has brought new challenges like cyber dependency, job displacement, and environmental concerns. So where does technology fit into this? Technological determinism argues that while technology drives change, it's ultimately shaped by people. As societies evolve, thinkers like Marx, Weber, and Durkheim offer a unique tool to make sense of it all. Marx saw technology as a double-edged sword, enhancing productivity but widening the gap between the proletariat and capitalists. Weber worried about bureaucracy dehumanizing workers. Imagine being reduced to a number on a spreadsheet. Durkheim studied how societies shift from collective to interdependent structures, warning about anomie, a sense of disconnection in modern life. One final thought. Despite advancements, societies face persistent questions. Can we use technology responsibly without damaging the planet? Will inequality always exist? And how do we balance individual freedom with societal obligations? There are no easy answers, but history reminds us to remain optimistic while we learn from the past. To start, let's define culture. Think of culture as the design for living, the values, beliefs, behaviors, practices, and even the objects that collectively define a way of life. In simpler terms, culture is how we, as human beings, make meanings of the world around us. Culture often feels invisible. It's the water we swim in, the air we breathe. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz famously said, "Man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun. I take culture to be those webs, and the analysis of it to be not an experimental science in search of law, but an interpretive one in search of meaning." This statement beautifully captures the essence of culture. It is a complex, dynamic system of meaning, making not fixed but fluid. As we explore culture further, remember this concept. Culture creates us, and in return, we continuously create and shape culture. Symbols. Symbols are the foundational building blocks of culture. They're anything from a flag to a word to a handshake that carries a specific meaning within a particular culture. However, symbols can be double-edged swords. For example, the lack of understanding of symbols may lead to culture shock when we struggle to decode the meaning embedded in a new environment. Language. Language is perhaps the most potent cultural tool. It is a system of symbols that enables communication and the transmission of it. Values and beliefs. Norms. Values and beliefs translated into norms, the rules and expectations that dictate behavior in society. And material culture. Finally, we have material culture, the physical artifacts a society creates. Cultural dynamics and integrations. Cultures and dynamics constantly evolving systems shape invention, discovery, and diffusion. When a new technology like a smartphone emerges, it can redefine cultural norms, values, and even language. At the same time, culture often lags behind innovation, creating friction between traditional values and modern realities. This cultural evolution is especially visible in a globalized context. As different cultures interact, they blend, clash, and transform. McDonaldization of society. Coined by George Ritzer, this concept explains how the principles of the fast food industry, efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control are applied to many aspects of social life. Key effects, close, intimate groups are being replaced by fast, efficient, yet distant interactions. Technologies such as mobile phones, email, and social media shape our ability to form meaningful connection across complex networks. Social groups. Definition: social groups are two or more people who identify and interact with one another, creating shared experiences. Primary groups, defined by Charles Horton Cooley as small, enduring groups with deep emotional ties, like families or close friends, their personal orientation. Secondary groups are large and impersonal, work teams and universities. Group conformity. The power of group dynamics is shaping individual behavior is profound as seen in these experiments. Ash research, participants conformed to group judgments about line length even when they knew the group was wrong. Conclusion: social pressure compels individuals to conform. Milgram's experiment, participant administered electric shocks under an authority figure's orders. Conclusion: ordinary people can commit harmful acts under authority. Zimbardo's Stanford experiment, simulated prison study where the participants adopted abusive roles as guards and submissive roles as prisoners. Situational context heavily influenced behavior. Reference groups, social groups that serve as benchmarks for evaluating oneself. Stauffer research, soldiers' optimism about promotion was influenced by group comparison rather than actual rates of advancement. Our judgments are relational and tied to specific social standards. Group size and social diversity. Key insight by George Simmel is dyad, two members, intense and meaningful but inherently unstable, and triad, three members, more stable, alliances can form against a third member, larger groups prioritize rules and regulations over personal connections. Peter Blau's findings. Large groups turn inward, heterogeneous groups encourage outward interactions, social parity fosters intergroup connections, and physical boundaries foster social boundaries. Organizations. Formal organizations, large secondary groups established to achieve goals efficiently. Amitai Etzioni's typology, utilitarian, normative, and coercive organization. Traits of bureaucracy by Max Weber. Specialization, hierarchical structures, rule-bound regulations, technical competence, impersonality, and formal written communication. Traits of bureaucracy is by Max Weber is specialization, hierarchical structures, rule-bound regulations, technical competence, impersonality, and formal written communications. Problems of bureaucracy. Alienation, dehumanization of individuals. Inefficiency and ritualism, obsession with rules, obstruct organizational goals. Inertia, organization perpetuate themselves beyond their original purpose. Abuse of power. Oligarchy, concentration of power among the few. Total institutions, places where the individuals are isolated and controlled by an administrative staff. prisons, mental hospitals, boarding schools. Key features by Erving Goffman is supervised lives, standardized environments, and formal rules. McDonaldization revisited. Principles of McDonaldization. Efficiency, calculability, emphasis on quantitative, uniformity, predictable results, and automation, reduced human involvement. Critical implications. Rational system create disenchantment and reduce human creativity. Society must balance efficiently with preserving individuality and spontaneity. Social Capital by Rupert Putnam, the connection between individuals fostering reciprocity and social bonds. The concern is decline in communal activities. New form of social bonds, personal communities, intimate ties with families, densely knit networks. And network individualism, individuals create personalized community ties through technology. Technology and social networks. Impact of mobile phones. Shifts from local to perpetual, instantaneous contact. Advantages in chance connectivity and coordination. Conserve intrusiveness. Social networking sites, platforms like Facebook, create expansive individualist networks that reshape traditional notion of community. So in conclusion, Chapter 6 underscores the transition from traditional, rigid societal structures to a flexible, interconnected network society. Hello everyone, this is a second part of Sociology podcast. Let's start with the basics. Microsociology is the branch of sociology that focuses on small-scale, everyday social interactions. Think of it as the study of life under a microscope. What happens in the face-to-face encounters, casual conversations, or even fleeting glances, this contrasts with macrosociology, which looks at large-scale structures like intuitions or global patterns. Imagine a city street. Macrosociology might examine how urban development policies affect housing, while microsociology focuses on how strangers interact while waiting at the crosswalk. One of the most important ideas here is the social construction of reality. Developed by sociologists Peter Berger and Thomas Lukeman, their groundkeeping idea is this. Reality isn't something out there. Instead, it is actively created by people during social interactions. It's a dynamic process where we assign meaning to objects, actions, and even people, creating a shared sense of what's real. Let's build on this with the famous Thomas theorem by Thomas. If people define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. What does this mean? It emphasizes how subjects' interpretations shape objective outcomes. Imagine two students. One believes their professor is unfair and harsh. They might feel anxious, avoid asking questions, and ultimately perform worse. Another student might think the same professor is strict but fair, and therefore work harder, excelling in their studies. Both beliefs create different realities and results. Now, how do we actually construct these shared realities? Through socialization. This is the process where individuals learn and internalize the values, beliefs, norms, and practices of their culture. Key points, agents of socialization. These include family, peers, schools, religion, and the media. Stages of socialization. Primary socialization occurs in childhood, often through family, while secondary socialization happens later in life in diverse social contexts, like schools or workplaces. No sociology discussion is complete without looking at the foundation of human personality. Freud's psychoanalytic theory helps explain how individuals develop their sense of self. According to Freud, the personality has three parts. Our primal instincts like hunger, aggression, or pleasure, the ego, the rational mediator between the idea and reality, and the superego, the moral compass influenced by societal norms and values. Freud believed that human behavior is a constant negotiation between these three forces. While the id might scream, "Eat the entire cake now," the superego says, "That's bad for you." The ego steps in, suggesting, "Maybe have one slice." Now shifting gears to George Herbert Mead, who took a different approach to understanding the self. For me, the self develops exclusively through social interaction. He identified two key components: the I, the spontaneous creative aspect of self, and the me, the socially conditioned aspect formed by internalizing how others view us. A good example is a child playing a game. Initially, they mimic their parents or peers, but over time, they understand societal roles like student, teacher, and police officer. Through this, they form a balanced, integrated self. Life as a stage, Goffman's dramaturgy. Here's an exciting concept by Erving Goffman, dramaturgy. Goffman compares life to theater performance, where they are all actors playing roles for different audiences. Think about how differently you act at a job interview compared to hanging out with your closest friends in dramaturgy. The front stage is where we perform roles for public viewing, smiling at customers as a cashier. The backstage is where we relax, dropping those roles, complaining about the customers during a break. Did you know even your stage of life is socially constructed? Childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and retirement aren't universal concepts. They vary widely depending on cultural and historical context. Take generational cohorts like Millennial or Gen Z, shared historical events like economic recession or rapid tech growth. Shape their attitudes, values, and behaviors. Understanding these contexts is key to understanding social change. Fast forward to today, our identities aren't just performed offline, but increasingly online. Social media platforms allow us to craft our digital selves, but how does this affect authenticity and privacy? When someone curates their Instagram feed with perfect travel photos, is it the authentic self or is it the role they perform for their audience? Hi everyone, and welcome back to Rasmus Study. This is chapter 8. Hopefully this helps. Sorry, I forgot that I'm reading it. Let's begin by understanding the foundation of this chapter. Social stratification is a system in which society ranks groups of people in hierarchy. Importantly, it's not just about individual differences, but a characteristic of society itself. It's universal, but the way it's expressed and the inequality it creates can differ across societies. Key features of social stratification. Stratification is a characteristic of society. Example, industrial societies often see social status as linked to personal talent, but in reality, privilege plays a significant role. It persists over generation. Most people experience horizontal mobility, changing roles within the same class. It involves inequality and beliefs. Systems of stratification are upheld by cultural beliefs that make such inequality seem natural or justified. Here is an example. Think about the stereotype that wealthy individuals deserve their status because they worked harder. This belief reinforces inequality, whenever or not it's actually true. Now let's talk about the different types of inequality that affect people worldwide. These aren't just limited to money or power. They include vital inequality, differences in health, birth rates, and death rates, often shaped by social factors. Existential inequality, how societies fail to recognize everyone as equal individuals. Resource inequality. This refers to disparities in access to things like wealth, education, and social connections. These inequalities often overlap, meaning a person's experience of one type can amplify others. At this point, it's important to understand intersectionality. This is the concept that different forms of inequality such as gender, race, and class interact and influence each other. For example, a working-class woman of color might face challenges that a working-class man or an upper-class woman doesn't experience. In examining stratification, societies are often divided into closed and open systems. Closed systems, little to no social mobility is allowed. Think slavery or caste system, where birth determines your destiny. Open system, social mobility is possible based on individual achievements, such as in class system. Now let's explore some major theories that explain why inequality exists and persists in society. Functionalism, Davis-Moore thesis. This perspective suggests that inequality plays a role in maintaining society order. Sociologists Davis and Moore argue that rewarding people differently encourages hard work and ensures society runs smoothly. Key ideas. Roles that require special skills and responsibilities get higher rewards. Society as a whole benefits when talent is properly distributed. However, critics argue that this theory ignores structural barriers that prevent access to these roles. For instance, higher education, or a path to high reward roles, requires financial resources not everyone has. Marx argued that stratification is rooted in class conflict. According to him, society has two main classes: the bourgeoisie, capitalist class who own the means of production, and the proletariat, workers who sell their labor. Marx predicted class struggle would eventually lead to revolution and more egalitarian society. While no global revolution has occurred, many of Marx's ideas resonate with movements for workers' rights and economic equality today. Weber added layers to Marx's class-based view by identifying three dimensions of stratification: class, access to economic resource; status, social prestige and lifestyle; and power, influence and control over others through political means. Three dimensions of stratification is class, status, and power. Modern implication. These dimensions are interrelated. For example, someone with higher economic resource often has greater social prestige, but there are exceptions such as academics who have prestige but earn less. Contemporary view on inequality. Pierre Bourdieu's framework. Bourdieu gives us a more nuanced perspective with concepts like cultural capital, knowledge, education, and cultural skills that provide advantages; social capital, benefits gained from one's social network; and symbolic capital, prestige or reputation. Key idea: these forms of capital reinforce class divisions and limit social mobility by favoring certain groups over others. Even today, around 27 million people live in conditions of forced labor, debt bondage, and trafficking, problems that continue to perpetuate inequality. Class in industrialist society. In places like Japan and in the UK, class systems have evolved to blend traditions and modernity, but stratification still creates barriers in terms of access to opportunities. As we explored, social stratification impacts every aspect of life, from education to healthcare and employment. Let's start chapter 12. Let's begin with the basics. What exactly are gender and sexualities? This concept might seem straightforward, but actually they're not. Sex refers to the biological distinction between males and females. These include chromosomes, reproductive organs, hormones, and external genitalia. For example, females typically have XX chromosomes, ovaries, and estrogen. Males usually have XY chromosomes, testes, and testosterone. But biology isn't the full story. Professor Simon Baron-Cohen, 5 levels of sex help us see a broader picture. Genetic sex, chromosomes, XX or XI. Gonadal sex, testes and ovaries. Genital sex, physical features, penis or vagina. Brain type, systemizing, traditional male, versus emphasizing, traditional female. And 5, sex typical behavior. Interest shaped by brain types such as gadgets for men or care-based roles for women. Importantly, sex often overlaps and doesn't fit neatly into these categories. For example, hermaphrodites have both male and female biological traits. This blurs the traditional binary view of sex. Here is where the things get exciting. Gender is not biologically fixed. It's socially constructed, negotiated, and performed. Sociologists often stress this distinction between biological sex and social gender. Definition to remember. Gender, the social aspect of difference and hierarchical between males and females. Gender identity, the subjective sense of being male, female, or something else. Gender roles, the expectation and behavior assigned to a particular sex. And gender performance, how masculinity or femininity is acted out in society. Gender isn't binary. People identifying as non-binary actively reject socially constructed male or female labels. And then there are transgender individuals, whose gender identity differs from their biological sex, encompassing transvestism, transsexualism, and beyond. Now let's discuss a critical framework, the gender order. This concept examines how society is organized masculinity and femininity into systems of power and relationships. It operates on different levels. Gender regime, gender power dynamics in smaller settings, such as class wars or families. Hegemonic masculinity, the culturally dominant way of being a man in society, often marginalizing subordinate masculinities. For example, hegemonic masculinity might prioritize traits like strength and authority, while subordinate masculinities, such as being nurturing, are dismissed or suppressed. How do we learn gender? Through socialization. Three main theories help explain gender development. Social learning theories, gender behaviors are learned through rewards, reinforcements, and punishments. Example, a boy rewarded for liking sports may come to associate masculinity with athleticism. Cognitive theories, children actively categorize their world. Example, a child might think, I'm a girl, so I'll play with dolls. Psychodynamic theories, Freud inspired. Early emotional attachments shape gender. Boys, for instance, separate from their mothers to identify with their powers and masculinity. Nancy Chodorov expanded this by showing how girls' emotional connection with their mothers lead them to prioritize relationships later in life, while boys strive for independence. Gender inequality isn't just about personal bias, it's built into society. Key terms to know include gender stratification, the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and privilege across genders, patriarchy, a system where men dominate, exploit, and oppress women, sexism, the belief that one sex is inherently superior to the other. Examples of patriarchal practices: gender violence, domestic and sexual violence against women, glass ceiling, women face barriers in career advancements due to cultural and institutional challenges. Functionalist theory, Talcott Parsons. Parsons viewed traditional gender roles as functional. Men were seen as rational and competitive, while women were emotional and nurturing. This theory has forced criticism for reinforcing male dominance and ignoring inequalities. Conflict theory, Friedrich Engels. Engels tied gender inequality to capitalism. As private property emerged, patriarchy intensified because men needed to control women to pass wealth to their heirs. Capitalism, he argued, relegated women to unpaid domestic labor, while men gained power as wage earners. Feminism challenges patriarchy and seeks gender equality. Key feminist approaches include liberal feminism, advocates equal rights within existing systems; socialist feminism, critiques capitalism for enforcing patriarchy; radical feminism, seeks to dismantle the idea of gender altogether; Black and postmodern feminism focuses on diversity and intersectionality in gender experiences. Sexuality is deeply connected to power and social norms. Some key ideas include heterosexism, a belief system that privileges heterosexuality over queer, and queer theory. It rejects fixed categories like heterosexual or homosexual and embraces fluid identities. With advances like contraception and LGBTQ+ rights, concepts like plastic sexuality, detached from reproduction, and pure relationships based on equality and communication have transformed how we approach relationships. To summarize, understanding gender and sexualities requires us to question societal norms, challenge inequality, and embrace diverse perspective. Let's go through to our third part, whatever. First, what are economies? Economies are social institutions organizing the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. However, economies don't exist in isolation. They intersect with politics, families, and even media. Let's go back in time to see how economies transform societies. The Agricultural Revolution. About 5,000 years ago, the Agricultural Revolution reshaped human life. Development of farming technologies, permanent settlements, and trade. Specialization of labor meant people could focus on specific tasks rather than just survival. This marked the beginning of complex economic systems. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, when economies transformed drastically. Key changes include new energy sources such as steam power, the shift to factory based manufacturing, the rise of mass production. Wage labor becomes the norm. Workers sold their time in a highly structured setting. The downside, workers often faced exploitation and harsh routines. In response, trade unions began to form to advocate for fair wages and conditions. The mid-20th century brought the information revolution, birthing the post-industrial era. Let's break it down. Automation reduced the reliance on manual labor, while managerial and clerical roles expanded. Economies shifted from producing tangible goods to information and services. Literacy and technological skills replaced mechanical expertise. This era also saw the decentralization of work. Telecommuting became possible thanks to the rise of digital technology. Economies operate across three main sectors. The primary sector involves extracting raw materials like agriculture and mining. The secondary sector focuses on manufacturing goods, turning those raw materials into products. The tertiary sector revolves around services rather than goods and dominates in high-income nations. Today, the shift of industries between these sectors shapes global dynamics such as sourcing and offshoring. Let's talk about capitalism. The dominant economic system, capitalism, hinges on three key principles: private ownership of property and resources. The pursuit of personal profit motivates innovation and efficiency. Free competition and markets where consumer choice drive demand. Economist Adam Smith argued that an invisible hand of supply and demand would regulate markets benefiting society. However, critics highlight its flaws such as income inequality and the creation of artificial consumer needs. Capitalism didn't stay the same over time. It evolved in three phases. Liberal capitalism, 19th century, free markets thrived, especially in the UK and US. Organized capitalism, 20th century, increased state intervention, especially during the events like the Great Depression. Disorganized post-Fordist capitalism, flexible production method emerged focusing on niche markets and globalized supply chains. Globalization has created a truly interconnected global economy, with 6 major consequences. Different regions specialize in economic activities, industrial production, services, or agriculture. Poor countries often have sweatshops where workers face exploitative conditions. Products frequently cross multiple borders during production, a process called fraction production. National governments lose control over economic activity within their borders. A small number of corporations dominate global markets. The inequality of wealth grows as global resources concentrate among elites. Socialism offers an alternative to capitalism, focusing on collective ownership of property, the pursuit of collective goals rather than personal profit, government regulation of the economy. Communism, as envisioned by Karl Marx, sought to eliminate class divisions entirely. In practice, however, socialist systems often fall short, leading to bureaucracy and elite dominance. In post-industrial economies, consumption isn't just functional, it's symbolic. Let's explore consumer culture and its effects. Goods become tools for identity expression. Brands take precise over products. Materialism arises as a cultural norm. The materialism hypothesis suggests three dynamics. Escalation hypothesis, people develop insatiable desires for more. Adaptation hypothesis, higher expectation lead to dissatisfaction. Displacement hypothesis, material focus distracts from personal relationship. The nature of work has drastically shifted. Traditional agriculture has declined, replaced by service jobs. Dual labor markets secure well-paid jobs from low-paying, precarious ones. Gender disparities persist, with women often facing barriers like the glass ceiling and the second shift. Finally, consumption patterns can exclude people based on economic means, access to transportation, or consumer skills. The spread of Disneyization highlights how the principle of entertainment have influenced commerce, emphasizing theming hybrid consumption and emotional labor. Thank you for listening. I hope you learn something from this. And Disneyization is the word that means that commercial transformation of things or environments into something simplified, controlled, and safe, like Disney.